At 9:17 a.m. on January 22, 1943, Second Lieutenant Raymond Hale crouched inside the shattered remains of a Japanese bunker west of Point Cruz. The bunker still smelled of burned timber and old cordite, a reminder that men had died here only days earlier. Hale pressed his cheek to the cool metal of his rifle, watching a banyan-tree 240 yards away through a scope the other officers had mocked for nearly 2 months. He was 26, soft-spoken, long-armed, a former Wisconsin state champion who could cut bullseyes out of a target at 1,000 yards. But here, in the jungles of Guadalcanal, the men of the 132nd Infantry Regiment saw him differently, another green officer with no combat kills, one more outsider carrying a private purchase hunting toy instead of a real battle rifle. For 72 hours, Japanese snipers had haunted the coconut groves around Point Cruz like ghosts. 11 of them, veterans of Manchuria and Shanghai, had killed 14 American soldiers in 3 days. They chose banyan trees as their lairs, towering, twisting giants that swallowed light and sound. Trees where a man could climb before dawn and watch the world through a slit of leaves until night fell. The sniper problem had become so severe that water details, medics, even company runners refused to move without escorts. Hale's commanding officer called his Winchester Model 70 "that little sweetheart." The platoon leaders called it his mail-order bride. When he had unpacked it at Camp Forest months earlier, a slim, blued steel precision rifle with a Lyman 2.5X Alaskan scope and a Griffin and Howe mount. The armorer had asked whether it was meant for deer or Germans. Hale had answered, neither, the Japanese. But the rifle had not followed him to the Pacific. While other soldiers cleaned their Garands aboard the troop ship, Hale had nothing but empty hands. His rifle was stuck in Illinois, sitting in a warehouse. He spent the long voyage imagining it destroyed, lost, or rusted beyond use. Then, 6 weeks after landing on Guadalcanal, a supply sergeant handed him a crate marked fragile. Inside was the rifle he had bought with 2 years of National Guard pay. He remembered running his thumb across the walnut stock, feeling the familiar grooves like shaking hands with an old friend. But affection did not win wars. Captain Aldridge ordered him to leave his civilian novelty in his tent. Hale carried it anyway. By late December 1942, the 132nd Infantry had relieved the exhausted Marines who had fought on the island since August. The Marines had seized Henderson Field, but failed to clear the groves west of the Guadalcanal River. Mount Austin still loomed like a boulder above the front lines, 1,514 feet of jungle and concealed bunkers. The Japanese called it the Gifu. They defended it with 47 bunkers and 500 men who refused to yield. The battalion attacked on December 17th and bled for 16 days, 34 killed, nearly 300 wounded. Hale had fired his Winchester exactly 0 times. The groves near Point Cruz felt like a different planet. Whispering trees, no fixed positions, no trenches. Just shadows and silence and Japanese snipers hidden in branches 80, 90 feet above the ground. They were patient men, trained men, men who knew how to wait for the moment a canteen was lifted, a helmet strap loosened, a head exposed. On January 19th, one sniper killed Corporal Jensen while he filled canteens at a creek. On the 20th, 2 more died on patrol. On the 21st, a bullet struck Private Mendez through the throat as he walked past a banyan his patrol had already passed twice. That night, Hale was summoned by the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harrigan. There was nothing casual in Harrigan's expression. He asked if Hale's mail-order rifle could actually hit anything. Hale told him his credentials. State champion at 1,000 yards, 6-inch groups at 600, 5 rounds inside 4 inches at 300 with iron sights. Harrigan gave him until morning to prove it. Hale spent the night cleaning cosmoline from the bolt, checking his mounts, verifying every screw, every click of windage. He loaded 5 rounds of 30 to 06 ball ammunition. He barely slept. At dawn on January 22nd, Hale moved into the ruined bunker overlooking the groves. He came alone, no spotter, no radioman, just his rifle, canteen, and 60 rounds in stripper clips. He lay prone on the cold earth and scanned the banyans with the slow, patient sweep of a man who had trained for exactly this moment. The jungle buzzed with insects, croaked with birds, and whispered with the wind. Except there was no wind. At 9:17, a branch moved. Not a sway. A shift. 87 feet up in a banyan, 240 yards out, Hale saw a form, a dark-clad figure, settled in a crook of 3 branches, peering east toward the American supply trail. 2 clicks, right for wind, even though the air was still. It was habit, ritual, muscle memory. He steadied his breath. His trigger broke like glass. The shot cracked across the groves. The figure jerked and tumbled. Branch after branch snapped as the body fell nearly 90 feet, hitting the ground with a soft thud that the jungle swallowed whole. Hale worked the bolt. A cool brass casing spun out. If he had killed the shooter, the spotter was close. At 9:43, Hale found him 60 yards north of the first kill, climbing down from his perch to relocate. He was fast, but not fast enough. Hale led his movement, squeezed, fired. The sniper pitched backwards and dropped through the leaves, rifle clattering behind him. 2 shots, 2 kills. By 11:21, Hale was still motionless, scanning. Then a Japanese bullet punched into a sandbag just 6 inches from his head. The impact threw dust across his face. He rolled left, heart pounding. The shot had come from the southwest. He waited 3 minutes before lifting his scope. At 11:38, he found sniper number 3. 73 feet up. Wrong branch, wrong angle. A mistake. Hale fired. The man fell without a sound. By noon, he had killed 5 enemy snipers. Word spread like wildfire. Men who had mocked his rifle now whispered his name with awe. They wanted to watch him work, but Hale refused. Spectators drew fire. Fire drew death. The Japanese adapted. They stopped moving in daylight. They hid deep in the canopy, becoming part of the sky. That afternoon yielded no more kills. But Hale had awakened something in the groves. The Japanese now understood a hunter was among them, one with patience as deep as theirs. The duel had begun. Dawn arrived on January 23rd with a roar of tropical rain, heavy enough to swallow sound and erase distance. The trees blurred into gray silhouettes. The jungle floor turned to mud. For 2 hours, Lieutenant Raymond Hale kneeled in the bunker with his rifle across his lap, listening to the steady drumming of water on shattered concrete. Rain was both blessing and curse. It masked movement, but it also masked the enemies. At 8:15, the storm lightened. By 8:45, visibility stretched to a hazy 150 yards. Hale settled the Winchester into his shoulder and resumed scanning the groves. His eyes felt gritty from strain. His hands were steady because they had to be. At 9:12, he saw its sniper number 6, positioned 290 yards out, a long shot for 2.5x magnification. The Japanese sniper had chosen his tree, low foliage, dense leaves, only a sliver of silhouette visible. He had used the rain to climb unseen. Smart. The Japanese were learning. Hale adjusted for distance, wind, humidity. He exhaled. The rifle bucked. The figure fell. Hale counted 10 seconds, keeping his scope fixed on the drop point. No movement. He did not celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate. But the Japanese answered. At 9:57, an uncanny whistling filled the air. Mortar shells. The first salvo landed 40 yards short. The second landed 20 yards short. Hale's blood ran cold. The third would land on top of him. He grabbed his rifle and ran. Mud sucked at his boots. Vines clawed his legs. He sprinted north and dove into a shell crater as the third salvo obliterated the bunker behind him. The ground shook violently. Chunks of concrete rained down. When the dirt settled, Hale crawled out of the crater, chest heaving, ears ringing. The bunker, his safe vantage point, was gone. In its place lay a blackened pit. He repositioned behind a fallen tree trunk 120 yards north. The ground was damp, but the line of sight was sharp and clear. Hale's world shrank to the whisper of wind, the smell of wet bark, and the slight shimmer of sweat on his rifle barrel. At 14:23, he killed sniper number 7. At 15:41, he killed number 8, a man perched nearly 94 feet high, invisible until the sunlight shifted and revealed a faint silhouette against the sky. A mistake. 1 second of exposure was all Hale needed. At 17, Captain Aldridge sent a runner. "Stand down. Return to headquarters." Hale lowered his rifle, the weight of the day settling into his bones. 8 kills, 12 shots fired, 4 misses. He had ended a threat that had crippled their battalion for weeks, yet he felt only fatigue. When the sun dipped, the groves turned to ink. That night, the rain returned. Hale lay awake in his tent, staring at the Winchester resting against his cot. 11 Japanese snipers had been operating in the groves. 8 were dead. That left 3. He replayed every engagement in his mind. The angles, the distances, the mistakes he had watched men make, the way each sniper moved differently, some cautious, some confident, some desperate. These last 3 would not be caught easily. They were the survivors, the patient ones, the ones who had watched their comrades fall and adapted. At 3, Hale gave up on sleep. He cleaned the rifle again, hands moving automatically. He knew the next day would be worse. By 5:30, the rain intensified. Hale chose a new position, a cluster of rocks, 70 yards south of yesterday's location. The Marines had used it as a machine gun nest weeks earlier. Hale liked the angle. Wide cover, elevated line of sight, unpredictable. The Japanese would expect him to return to the bunker or the fallen tree. He wanted the unexpected. At 7:43, the rain tapered to a drizzle. Hale wiped water from his scope, steadied his breath, and waited. At 8:17, he spotted sniper number 9. A palm tree this time, only 190 yards out, just 40 feet high. Wrong elevation, wrong concealment, wrong everything. After 3 days of dueling, Hale knew a trap when he saw one. He studied the scene again. The angle was too clean, the shape too visible. No veteran sniper would choose such an exposed platform unless it was bait. Hale didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Instead, he scanned left, then right, then higher, then lower, searching the groves with slow precision. 11 minutes passed. At 8:28, he found the real threat, sniper number 10. 91 feet up in a banyan northwest of the palm. Perfect concealment. View of Hale's old firing position. He was waiting for Hale to reveal himself. A duel between 2 hunters, one watching the tree, the other watching the ground. Hale made his choice. He aimed at the decoy in the palm and fired. The figure fell instantly. Hale snapped the Winchester toward the banyan. Movement? The real sniper turned toward the sound just a fraction, just enough. Hale fired. The man fell from 91 feet, his rifle tumbling after him. 2 shots, 2 kills. And with them, Hale revealed his new position. Within seconds, machine gun fire raked the rock formation. Bullets snapped against stone, chipping off dust and bark. Hale rolled off the rocks and sprinted east, diving into a drainage ditch. Mud engulfed him. He held the Winchester above the waterline to keep the barrel dry. At 8:34, the machine gun fire stopped. The jungle fell silent. Hale waited motionless. At 9:47, a realization chilled him. The last sniper wasn't in the trees. He was on the ground. A shape slipped between the ferns 60 yards south, crawling parallel to the tree line, moving like a shadow with purpose. The Japanese sniper was hunting Hale, working his way toward the rocks where Hale had taken his shots. Hale remained submerged, barely breathing, the Winchester balanced like a steel reed in his hands. The crater rim blocked his view. He would need to rise to fire. Rising meant exposure. Exposure meant death. At 9:52, the sniper reached the rocks. He scanned the area carefully, studying every angle, every shadow. Hale admired him. This was a man who had survived 10 days of American operations, a man who made no careless moves. Too exposed, too clean, too deliberate. Another decoy. Hale expanded his awareness. Breath calm, heart slow, eyes wide. At 10:06, he found the second-man sniper, number 11, or perhaps number 10's partner, 70 yards northwest behind a fallen tree. Rifle aimed at the drainage ditch where Hale should have been hiding. 2 hunters, 2 angles, 1 kill zone. Hale had to change the rules. He submerged deeper into the ditch until only his eyes and the scope top remained above the water, the barrel angled toward the sky. At 10:13, both snipers began moving east, executing a sweep pattern. They passed within 18 yards of Hale. When their backs were fully exposed, Hale rose from the water like a ghost. Water dripped from his helmet, his sleeves, the rifle's barrel. He aimed, fired once. The first sniper fell instantly. He cycled the bolt, fired again. The second dropped behind the fallen tree. Silence, the long, heavy silence after violence. 11 shots fired over 3 days. 11 Japanese snipers dead. Hale wanted to breathe, just once, just deeply. But at 10:24, he froze. Voices, Japanese voices, multiple. An infantry patrol. They had found the bodies, and they were following Hale's tracks. Lieutenant Raymond Hale pressed himself deeper into the muddy crater, water lapping against his collarbone. His breath slowed to a near halt as Japanese voices spilled through the trees. 6 men, at least, maybe more. The patrol was moving toward the fallen snipers, their boots squelching in mud, their equipment rattling softly beneath banyan leaves. These weren't the patient ghosts Hale had hunted for days. These were infantrymen, angry, alert, unpredictable, and they were closing in. At 10:28, the voices shifted. The patrol had found the first body. Hale couldn't understand their words, but urgency carried its own universal meaning. They moved to the second body. Someone shouted. Another answered. Twigs snapped. A canteen clinked against a belt buckle. Then the voices began moving again toward him. Hale's stomach tightened. He had been careful with sound, careful with movement, but he hadn't been careful with one thing: tracks. His boots had left a trail in the mud leading from the rocks to the water-filled crater. Now 6 armed soldiers were following those tracks like a dotted line straight to his position. He had 5 rounds left, 5 bullets against 6 rifles. Bad odds. At 10:31, the first soldier appeared at the crater's rim. His silhouette blocked out a slice of sky. He looked down directly at Hale, eyes widening in shock. Hale fired from the water. The soldier toppled backward, crashing into the ferns. 2 more heads appeared at the rim. Hale worked the bolt underwater mud, dragging at the mechanism, and fired twice. Both men dropped, tumbling out of sight. Shouts erupted. A storm of frantic Japanese voices burst through the jungle. Hale scrambled out of the crater's north side, mud clinging to his uniform, rifle slapping against his shoulder. He ran 20 yards and dove behind a fallen log. Bullets cracked past, snapping branches, kicking up dirt. Hale pressed his cheek to the wet ground, heartbeat thundering in his skull. Through the scope he spotted 2 soldiers advancing toward the crater, rifles raised, 50 yards away. He waited for the lead man to commit, then fired. The man dropped. The second dove for cover. 2 rounds left. Then Hale heard more voices behind him this time, flanking, coordinated. He would be surrounded in under a minute. He made his decision. He had to break contact. Hale ran. Branches whipped his face. Vines clawed his legs. Mud tried to suck him down. For 90 seconds he sprinted like a hunted animal, lungs burning, until he dove into another shell crater. Dry this time. He listened, waited, heart hammering in his ears. Silence. The Japanese hadn't followed. They were regrouping around their dead. At 10:47, Hale began moving again low, cautious, shifting from cover to cover. He moved northeast toward American lines, Winchester cradled like the fragile lifeline it was. Each sound in the jungle felt magnified. A snapping twig became a gunshot. A fluttering leaf became a footstep. Paranoia sharpened into survival. This was no longer marksmanship. This was escape. By 11:13, Hale reached the perimeter. A Marine sentry nearly fired before Hale identified himself. They escorted him back to battalion headquarters. Captain Aldridge and Lieutenant Colonel Harrigan were waiting. Tense, pale, Hale delivered his report. 11 Japanese snipers killed in 4 days. 12 shots total. 11 hits. A 12th shot fired at the infantry patrol. 3 more kills during the firefight. He had 2 rounds left. The rifle needed cleaning. Mud in the action, water in the barrel, scope slightly fogged. Aldridge stared at him like he was seeing the man for the first time. There was no mockery left in anybody's voice. Hale was told to stand down. No operations tomorrow. The battalion was shifting east. The Point Cruz groves were no longer priority terrain. Japanese forces were retreating westward. Intelligence suggested they would evacuate Guadalcanal within 2 weeks. Hale returned to his tent and began cleaning the Winchester. He worked silently, movements slow and deliberate, as though cleansing not just mud, but the memory of the past day. Patches of oil-stained cloth slid through the barrel. Metal gleamed again. The rifle was his companion, his burden, his last line of defense. At 14 hours, a runner arrived. Division headquarters wanted Hale immediately. Hale expected reprimand, unauthorized engagements, ammunition expenditure, operating alone without support. Instead, he found 3 officers waiting: Aldridge, Harrigan, and Colonel Ezra R. Tomlinson, the regimental commander. Tomlinson had only one question. "Lieutenant, can you teach other men to do what you've done?" Hale paused. He didn't think of the kills. He thought of Jensen at the creek, Mendez near the banyan, the 14 men who had died before he ever pulled the trigger. He thought of the fear in the jungle when no one dared walk alone. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "But I'll need time, and rifles with optics, and men who can already shoot." Tomlinson nodded. "We have 14 Springfield rifles with unearthed telescopic sights, Marine sniper rifles left behind, and I have 40 men in the regiment who qualified expert before deployment." "Good," Hale said. "I'll take all of them. One more condition." Hale wanted to keep his Winchester. Tomlinson agreed immediately. Training began on January 27th, 2 miles east of Henderson Field. 40 men stood in loose formation before Hale. They were confident on paper, expert marksmen, but none of them had fired a shot in a jungle war. None had killed a man at distance. None understood what Hale had learned in the groves. Patience is a weapon. Stillness is a shield. Timing is the difference between a clean kill and a dead friend. Hale started with fundamentals: breathing, trigger squeeze, reading wind in a forest that never stopped moving, using terrain to steady the rifle, using shadows to disappear. The Springfield rifles were heavier than Garand's 11 pounds, with the unearthed scopes. The weight forced discipline. Forced economy of motion. The men shot at 100 yards, then at 200, then 400, then at partially hidden targets. By January 30th, 32 of the 40 men could consistently hit man-sized silhouettes at 300 yards under field conditions. Hale divided them into 16 two-man teams: 1 shooter, 1 spotter. Shooter carried the rifle. The spotter carried binoculars and a Garand. Roles switched after each kill. This prevented dependence and fostered redundancy. On February 1st, Hale led 4 teams into the field. Their task: clear Japanese stragglers west of the Matanikau River. At 7:20, Hale and a spotter named Corporal Hayes set up on high ground overlooking a narrow trail. Minutes later, a Japanese soldier appeared. Hayes confirmed. Hale fired. The man dropped. Clean, quick. Over 6 hours, the team killed 7 more Japanese soldiers on that trail. 6 clean kills. 1 miss due to a sudden gust of wind. The other teams reported similar results. 23 Japanese soldiers eliminated, 0 American casualties. For the first time since arriving on Guadalcanal, Hale felt something unfamiliar relief. He had turned fear into skill, chaos into tactics, pain into knowledge. The sniper section continued operating through early February. By February 9th, they had killed 74 Japanese soldiers, verified, observed kills. Then came February 7th. During an operation near the Tinamba River, Hale saw a muzzle flash, a rifle cracked, pain exploded across his left shoulder. The force spun him and dropped him in the mud. Hayes dragged him behind cover as bullets snapped overhead. The wound bled heavily, but the bullet had missed bone and arteries. Hale stayed conscious, jaw clenched, eyes blazing with stubborn will. He hated being carried away, hated leaving his rifle behind, though Hayes retrieved it before medics evacuated Hale toward Henderson Field. It would be weeks before Hale held the Winchester again. He did not know it yet, but Guadalcanal, his crucible, was over. And a new war, a harder war, waited beyond the horizon. Lieutenant Raymond Hale spent 2 weeks in the field hospital near Henderson Field, recovering in a canvas cot while the world around him shifted. Outside, the war's rhythm continued. Engines droned overhead. Stretcher-bearers moved constantly between wards. Nurses whispered instructions as they passed. But Guadalcanal itself was changing. The Japanese were leaving. By February 9, 1943, American forces reached Cape Esperance and found it empty. The evacuation was complete. After 6 months of hell, the battle for Guadalcanal, the island that had consumed thousands of lives, was over. Hale listened to the news quietly. He didn't cheer or congratulate himself. He stared at the ceiling of the tent and thought about the 11 snipers in the groves, the infantry patrol that nearly killed him, Corporal Hayes' steady hands pulling him out of the line of fire. The sniper section he created continued operating even while he healed. Their final tally before the Japanese withdrawal: 74 confirmed kills. 0 friendly casualties during sniper operations. Hale had given them structure. But what they had given him was harder to explain, a sense that chaos could be shaped into order. That skill mattered, that precision mattered, that one man with a rifle could change the fate of many. On February 13th, Hale's shoulder was stitched, bandaged, and declared stable enough for transport. He expected reassignment within the 25th Infantry Division. Instead, new orders arrived from Pacific Command. They were vague, classified. They mentioned Burma, specialized operations, deep penetration tactics, jungle infiltration, the kind of work that swallowed men whole. Hale read them twice. Then he volunteered. By March, he boarded a transport heading west across the Pacific toward India, toward a new unit with no official name yet. A unit being assembled for a mission many believed impossible. 3,000 men, no heavy support, no supply lines. A long march through unforgiving jungle territory the Japanese believed impassable. A mission that could only be survived by men who understood how to vanish into the trees. When Hale arrived in India on April 3, 1943, he was led into a room with 200 other officers. The briefing was terse. The unit was the 5,307th Composite Unit, provisional. But the men had already given themselves another name: Merrill's Marauders. Hale didn't know what to think. He felt pride, fear, anticipation, and a strange sense of inevitability. He had trained for this without knowing it. Guadalcanal had been rehearsal for a much larger stage. During training in central India, he assessed his equipment. The Winchester Model 70 had been effective on Guadalcanal, but Burma would be different. No supply chain, no easy evacuation, weeks-long patrols, monsoons, mountain passes. Every ounce mattered. Hale replaced the Lyman Alaskan scope with a lighter Weaver, 330, same magnification, 8 ounces lighter. He swapped the factory stock for a synthetic one, shaving more weight. When he was done, the rifle weighed 8 pounds 14 ounces. He shouldered it, felt the new balance, the new weight. It felt purposeful, By the time the Marauders crossed the Burma frontier in February 1944, Hale's rifle was ready, but the real question was whether the men were. The march began on February 24th. The first week alone covered 83 miles of mountainous jungle. Malaria spread through the ranks. Mules broke legs and had to be put down. Men collapsed from exhaustion. The heat felt like walking with a furnace strapped to the chest. But the Marauders pushed on. They engaged the Japanese 12 times before even reaching the North Ranges. The Marauders didn't hold ground. They struck and disappeared. They attacked supply lines, cut telegraph wires, ambushed patrols, and hit outposts from angles the Japanese never anticipated. Through it all, Hale carried the Winchester, strapped across his pack, and he used it only 3 times. Once, at 412 yards, his longest recorded combat shot, against a Japanese officer directing troops across a river. Hale fired once. The officer fell. The crossing unraveled into confusion and retreat. Once at 380 yards, picking off a machine gun crew, pinning down Hale's platoon. And once at 290 yards, against a sniper who had pinned a Marauder patrol. Hale fired before the Japanese even knew they were being watched. 3 shots, 3 kills. Then he vanished into the jungle, leaving no trace. By late May, the Marauders had marched more than 700 miles through mud, monsoons, leeches, disease, and terrain so steep that men had to crawl on all fours. They captured the Mietkiina airfield on May 17th, one of the most strategic victories in the Burma theater. But the cost was devastating. More than half the unit was sick, wounded, or incapacitated. The Marauders were combat effective in spirit only. Their bodies had been pushed beyond human limits. Hale survived. Barely. But after 3 months of fighting, he realized something profound. The Winchester Model 70, his beloved precision rifle, no longer fit the war evolving around him. Modern battlefields were changing. Range mattered less. Mobility mattered more. Semi-automatic firepower like the Garand would dominate the future. This wasn't a failure of the rifle. It was reality. When the Marauders were evacuated and disbanded in June 1944, Hale returned to the United States. He was promoted to captain and assigned to Fort Benning, Georgia, as an instructor. He taught marksmanship, fieldcraft, small unit maneuver, jungle survival. Everything the war had taught him, he now passed on. But he rarely looked at the Winchester anymore. It stayed in a footlocker under his cot, wrapped in an oilcloth, steel slowly cooling, history quietly settling into its bones. The war ended. Hale earned 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and a Combat Infantryman badge. He was discharged in January 1947. He returned to Wisconsin, earned a degree in political science through the GI Bill, studied at Oxford, traveled through East Africa, studying political systems and conflict resolution. He eventually settled in Washington, D.C., working as a lecturer and specialist on African affairs. He almost never spoke of Guadalcanal, or Burma, or the 11 snipers, or the Winchester. But in 1947, something inside him shifted. He realized that the memories, the tactics, the lessons, if he didn't record them, they would die with him. He owed them preservation, not glory, not myth, truth. He spent 6 months writing a manuscript more than 400 pages long, a technical clinical account of rifles, optics, jungle combat, Japanese weaponry, and the psychology of sniping. A friend at the National Rifle Association convinced him to publish it. The book became Shots Fired in Anger, a quiet masterpiece, still studied by firearms historians and collectors decades later. Hale's observations about Japanese small arms remain among the most detailed ever recorded. Hale lived long enough to watch the Garand become the M14, then the M16. He watched sniping evolve into a formal discipline with elite schools, purpose-built rifles, and doctrine shaped by lessons men like him learned alone in the jungle. He watched younger soldiers rediscover truths he had learned under fire. Raymond Hale died on January 3, 2009, at the age of 90. His Winchester Model 70, the rifle that had killed 11 Japanese snipers in 4 days. The rifle that cleared the Point Cruz groves when an entire battalion could not, was donated to the National Firearms Museum in Fairfax, Virginia. It sits behind glass now. Visitors pass it every day, unaware of what it did, unaware that a quiet marksman from Wisconsin once changed the course of a battle with nothing but patience, precision, and courage. Most walk past without stopping, but those who know, know. It was more than just a rifle. It was proof that skill matters, that courage matters, that one man can alter the fate of many.